Welcome to my presentation on positionality, or how old were you when? A 10-minute lightning talk. So since our time is precious, I just want to remind you of the required materials. You need a sliver of open-mindedness, at least, and something to write on and with. We're going to get started by looking at the definitions of the personal versus positionality. The personal, how we usually engage the world around us, versus positionality. The personal, belonging to or affecting a particular person as perceived and internalized by that person. Now, this is in contrast to the work we have to do for positionality. And that is the fact or quality of occupying or adopting a particular position in relation to others, usually with reference to issues of specific cultural experiences that intersect other ways of being like class, ethnicity, and gender, etc. To begin, what we want to do is think of those labels and identities assigned to us by others. So when I did this, I created my list number 1 by thinking about different points in my life and what were some of those labels and identities assigned to me by others. We live our lives by identifying, and often our identity comes uninvited. So I'm going to ask you to take about 30 seconds, and you're going to think about those labels and identities assigned to you by others. Don't worry about not having enough time, because you can spend more time on these ideas once the video is completed. So are you ready? Let's go. Okay, stop. Breathe. Think about a favorite song. Just step back from the list, because this activity can be a little mentally taxing. So we're going to keep going with that idea, and now we're going to look at labels and identities assigned to me by me. So you think about those labels that you've given yourself throughout the years, because yes, people put ideas and labels on us, but we also do this for ourselves. So for list number 2, I came up with a list of identities I've assigned to myself over the years. For your turn, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Think about the labels and identities assigned to you by you. And again, you'll have about 30 seconds. Okay, stop. Take a breath. Step back from the list. So now that you and I have these two lists, one of the things we're going to look at is, what are those significant labels and identities? So which labels and identities from each list have significantly impacted your life? Using my list as an example, when you review your list, you're looking for very like ideas. So you want to highlight anything that's the same, because that's going to be very important. And I've highlighted those labels that are significant for me as they populate the screen. However, I have at least 2 identities that are exactly the same, or even if they're very similar. You definitely want to highlight both of those, because even if you don't like those identities, if they appeared on both your lists, they're likely significant. So what we're going to do next is think about those labels and identities, but set them aside while we look at what does this mean as we gauge in the world around us. So in cultural accounts of experience, positionality refers to the fact that a given social situation exists. So for me, I have these 2 identities that appeared on both my lists, and whether or not I am connecting and recognizing it consciously, likely I'm living these two identities in already given social situations. So how old were you when you actually began to make this connection to these social situations? So how old were you when you first recognized connections between your personal understanding of a label or identity and the fact that it existed as part of a given social situation? I was 12 years old. However, American scholar and intellectual W.B. Du Bois makes an account of being 5 years old when he began to make these connections. So why do I ask about age? Because that's important. How often in your life are you forced to willingly, or you choose to think about these connections? The earlier you do it, the more likely you have more practice in getting outside of the personal and seeing yourself in relation to others. Often people in marginalized or peripheral parts of our world and existence, they're often forced to do this a lot more often than other people. So age plus those cultural accounts equals positionality. Again, in cultural accounts of experience, positionality refers to the fact that a given social situation exists and to the specific conditions of that given situation. That is important. So consider your age and the account of the experience, those narrative events from which you first made connections between an identity and that situation. Those events are the material to help us understand the specific conditions of that given situation. So my age, I was 13. My cultural account is a family situation. It has to do with my father and his particular way of seeing the world in a gendered male-female, which was not always consistent way. But at the age of 12, we had a significant conversation that helped me get outside of feeling personally seeing myself as a girl and then being able to articulate my relationship, not just to my father, but to other people around me, and considering what being a girl meant differently from a personal perspective. So with age in mind, what is just one cultural account of an experience from which you first began to make these connections? Because these are the specific conditions. That's how we recognize those specific conditions of that situation. So this is the work of articulating your positionality. You have to draw attention to some things personal and then apply them to your relationship with others. That personal attention, characteristics of defining your social position, your settings where you grew up, family information, formal and informal education, as well as the professional lens with which you engage others. You take this personal and we apply it to the positionality that draws on the particular position you have in relationship to others, the conditions under which that position might arise, the factors stabilizing it, and the particular implications of that position, and reference to the forces that maintain it. I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I hope this presentation was useful. We have another version of this that we will offer on Learning Day, so if you're interested in that, please check out the CTE and sign up for that Learning Day session.